Welcome to Therapy Unplugged, the podcast where two therapists offer insights to the real-life issues we all experience. We are your hosts, Sarah Benoit and Megan McCullough.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back. And also welcome to our final episode of season 1.
Yes, can you believe it?
Not really. Not really. If I counted right, Sarah, I think that this is our 12th full episode.
Yes.
And then if you count our bonus episodes, it's our 22nd.
I think so. Or maybe 24th? Not sure. But you're in the right range
Up
for
in
sure.
the 20s.
Yeah,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Up in the 20s. And
Yes.
so we are certainly coming back for a season 2, but we thought a good way to maybe wrap up season 1, but also kind of be reflective, right,
Mhm.
of season 1 is to end the season on a deep dive into self-care. And I don't know about you, but I think that self-care is one of those buzzwords, kind of similar to mindfulness that gets
Mhm.
tossed around a lot. And I don't know if there's always a real clear understanding of what those words mean. And granted, I think they can mean different things to different people. But our focus today is to do a deeper dive into self-care and maybe give our listeners some ideas on how they can deepen or expand self-care practices.
Mhm. Yes, and I think, I don't know if this is helpful for listeners, and maybe even for us in terms of our framework, but I think to your point with it being kind of a big buzzword, which, I love the fact that it is in the sense that it means people are paying attention to it. But I also think it might be important to let listeners know maybe what it's not.
Yes, completely agree, right? And that kind of segues nice into maybe we can have a conversation about what is our definition of self-care? And you're absolutely right. I think embedded in the definition of self-care needs to be what, in our opinion, self-care is not.
Right.
And that might even be a good place to start in terms of the definition. Um,
Sure.
it's funny too because we do our notes separately and then I'll send them to you and I noticed that we both put in our notes what we feel self-care is not. And I
Mhm.
think I had used the word, yeah, so to me, self-care is not the same as self-gratification.
Right.
And to take that a little deeper, so what do I even mean by that? I think that if at the end of a long day, you want to unwind with whatever it is, let's just say it's a glass of wine. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Um, but I wouldn't necessarily call it self care, especially if that glass of wine or whatever it is, the food, the shopping, that you name it, if
Mhm.
it becomes a habit where you're stressed out and so you're almost trying to numb perhaps by doing some of those things, um that's not really what we're talking about here. I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I actually really agree. I agree with that, and I think one of the examples I had thought about and, it's interesting because I know I've joked about this with clients, with friends, and the term, like, retail therapy.
Yes.
um, we've thrown out there. And I think to your point, that self-gratification piece, right? When we think of, okay, this is making me feel good in the moment.
Mhm.
So maybe I'm going to go shopping and spend however much and buy, whatever. Uh in the moment, that's great. So short term, it fills the need, but long term, does it fill the need? And I think to your point, when we think of more the short term things, are we doing these things to maybe numb or fill a void or a hole? And, then that brings the question is, okay, really, is that self care? Because
Right.
if we're, much like, again, using that retail therapy example, in the moment we buy something and the next day we have buyer's remorse and we're like, "Oh man, why did I do that?" Now
Mhm.
I feel worse than I did before.
Right.
And, whereas and we'll get into this later, but even how we manage our finances is a means of self-care.
Absolutely. Yes, and you know what? I really love that. I hadn't even thought of it this way, but I love that you just said that what it's not is it like so for example, retail therapy might feel good in the moment, and it might give you a real short-term rush of endorphins or just,
Mhm,
thinking, "Oh, this feels good, so this must mean I'm taking care of myself." But I think now to get to the definition of what self-care is, to me, I like to think of self-care almost as like a preventative.
mhm,
So it's a preventative to, for example, diminish, let's say, burnout, right? We just did this
mhm,
recent episode on burnout. Or, thinking about our season, we did an episode on chronic overwhelm.
mhm.
We did an episode on perfectionism. So I think that true self-care practices, and I really do think of it as a practice, can be an antidote to many of the things that we have been discussing this whole season.
Right, I agree, and that's one of the things, I mean, you said this kind of in the beginning where I think this episode really ties our whole season together because if you think too in terms of every episode we've offered up strategies, and I'm guessing that if we were to look back and kind of outline the strategies that we have thrown out there in each episode, they probably fit somewhere, in some category of self-care.
Yes.
And one of the things that, I'm gonna steal your MO for a minute because 'cause
Mhm.
you're good at throwing quotes out there, but I really loved this quote by Sandra Romanoff. She's a PsyD, and she said, "Self-care is important because it helps reestablish balance and avoids burnout. It's often the mechanism of recalibrating and getting in touch with our ability to play, have fun, relax, and connect." And I read that and I thought, "Wow, that even sums up our whole season."
Absolutely. Yes, I love that, and it's such a good example, right, of what I was just saying, that it's a preventative, right?
Exactly.
It's not necessarily, in the moment, I'm gonna indulge in this thing because I deserve it. It's 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 more about how do I live my life in a way where I'm balanced physically, I'm balanced mentally, I'm balanced, some of these other topics we'll get into that you may not always equate with self-care, like financially,
Mhm.
environmentally. Um,
Yes.
and then those practices allow us to have have the fun, have the joy, right? Have the meaningful connections with others because the we have the energy to offer meaningful connections to others.
Exactly, exactly. It's and I like the word energy because it's also a way of protecting and preserving your energy so that you have it to give or use where you want or need to.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that what you just said, I'll just share one of the quotes that I had discovered in preparing for this episode. Um, this is by Katie Reed. She says, "Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you."
Mm,
And I really like that because what it made me think of, Sarah, is I've had many sessions with various clients where at one point or another, if we're talking about self-care, I will hear something along the lines of, well, I want to do more self-care, but it almost feels selfish.
mhm,
And what this quote is saying is it's almost the opposite of being selfish, because if we do not put any time and effort and energy into these basic self-care practices, we're not going to have a lot to
right,
offer the world because our cup is going to be consistently empty.
right, right. And it's kind of like the oxygen mask. You know, they tell you in an airplane, put it on first, and that allows you to then take care of what you need, to take care of. And it's the same thing. And I think there is that misnomer that people I hear not only do they feel it's selfish, but they also say, "Oh, I don't have time. I don't have time to do that." And it seems so counterintuitive for a lot of people to think, "Well, if I spend time on this, I'm actually going to be creating more."
Yep.
It's that's so hard for some people to wrap their brain around, but I've seen once people kinda rent the idea and start to adopt it, they do. They have more energy, they're more present, their relationships are more enriched and they're deeper, and, there's so much that goes with it, but it's almost like you kinda have to the words alone don't do it justice, they have to experience it.
Mhm. Very well said. Yes. So does it make sense do you want to kind of go into more of a deeper dive into some of these categories, for
Sure.
lack of a better word, these categories of self-care? Do you think that that's a good time to
Yeah,
delve into that?
absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, so I'll just start with a really basic one that I think perhaps a lot of us already, when we think of self-care, hopefully anyway, we're we're thinking about this category. So physical self-care
Mm,
is the idea that we're including activities and practices into our lives that basically improve and or maintain good physical health, right?
mhm,
So, this is so important. I know we've talked about this in previous episodes, but I think that there's a real connection between the level of stress that we are encountering in our lives and the level of, or let's say the imbalance we might present when it comes to our physical health, right? So,
mhm,
like, I think, for example, stress and chronic pain are often tied together. Um, or just stress and, well, I don't have time. I've even heard things like, I don't have time to like stay hydrated. Like, I don't have time to remember, right, some of these really basic, principles, and I fully understand why people feel that they don't have the time,
mhm.
but I think getting back to what you were saying a minute ago, it really is we're talking about a whole mindset change here, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you bring up the kind of the physical health because one of the things that pops up for me, is that idea of sleep.
Yeah.
And, and like you said, I mean, we're probably gonna do at some point, talk more about sleep in maybe future episodes.
Yeah.
But the huge correlation I see is that people who aren't getting enough sleep, their anxiety is jacked up. And, you know, I don't think people necessarily intuitively make that correlation because
Mhm.
maybe if they're not sleeping or if they're like, go, 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 but then when I sit down and I'm talking with them, like, well, how's your sleep been? Oh, well, maybe it hasn't been that good, or I'm
Mhm.
waking up a lot, and I think, you bring up a good point too, where, at least in my mind, a lot of these and as we're talking about these different areas, I think it's important for people to realize there's overlap. Like, these aren't
Oh,
just
yes.
boxes.
Absolutely.
So if your physical health if we're talking physical health and we're saying, "Okay, sleep is really important, making sure you're hydrated is really important." Um, okay, well, if I'm nourishing my body, if I'm taking care of my body, my mental health is going to be stronger. I'm
Exactly.
going to feel better, which is going to probably improve my ability to function at work and in my relationships. And so it is all tied together.
I completely agree. Yeah, such a good point. Um, Taking care of one area is automatically gonna lead to some of these other areas probably feeling better.
Right, right. And I think you know, it's very interesting. I met with someone this week and we were talking about the importance of doctor's appointments.
Mhm.
And, I think it's something well, I don't really know anyone that enjoys going, but it's I think it can be a hard habit to establish, but once you do like the example I shared with a client was I said, I was the person who I would only go to the doctor if something was wrong.
Mhm.
So I hadn't had a physical in 12 years. Now, granted, this was a while ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and they're like, "You really need a physical, Sarah." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll make the appointment on the way out." And they knew I wouldn't.
Right, right.
So they literally were like, "You're gonna sit here and wait in this room, and someone's gonna come in, and we're going to make the appointment for you." I was like, "Oh, man, I can't get out of it now." But but by doing that
Mhm.
and that is now how we do it. So I do go for my annual physical,
Mhm.
but I don't leave the room until the next one is booked. And it doesn't phase me anymore because it's like, "Okay, cool, that's on the books, I don't have to worry about it." And, yeah, sure, initially, I hated it, and I'm like, "I don't wanna do this. This
Mhm.
is just taking up time." But now it's old hat and it's just part of the routine. And I think that's part of this self-care. It is about making these things, more just part of the routine. How do you weave them in? How do you make time to stay hydrated? What's your system?
Mhm.
That kind
Exactly, and one other thing I'll add to the physical category, and I know this is a really obvious one, but, um, you know, uh, I'm thinking about this lack of time, right, that I think we all tend to feel,
Mhm.
and moving your body, right? So,
Yes.
similar to maybe making those doctor's appointments, it's like, "Ah, I don't have time for this." One thing that, I discovered years ago was, I decided I wanted to incorporate more yoga, just or even basic
Mm.
stretching into my life in the mornings, and I kept putting it off, and one day I sat down and I asked myself, "Well, why am I putting this off?" And immediately what came to me was I don't have time. I already get up early. I already have a routine where I meditate, which is very important to me. And how in the world, like how much earlier am I going to have to get up? But here's the thing. I was thinking in my mind, well, I need an hour
Uh,
and to like, I need an hour every morning to do yoga. Well, is that really true?
mhm.
Because what I discovered was I literally, rather than doing an hour, I decided, you know what? I'm going to do like 2 minutes every morning. I'm
Mm.
going to start just 2 minutes of stretching. And to me, when we're talking about self care, that's something that I really want our listeners to know is that what's most important in my mind is establishing a habit, establishing a routine. And what amazed me was establishing a routine every morning of 2 minutes of yoga
Mhm.
had so many benefits because then every morning it after a couple of weeks, I was like, "Oh, it's my yoga time." And then guess what? I added to it.
Mhm.
Like I found, you know what? I think I have 5 minutes, right? And so it's I'm just bringing it up again because I think that as people are listening to this, I think that time and maybe money too. I could see how
Oh, yep.
financial concerns about some of these things are also coming up for others, and I just think it's worthy of having just a real conversation, about the blocks to or the blocks that people are perceiving as keeping them from taking better care of themselves.
Right, and you brought up something which just sparked an idea for me. You mentioned the financial piece, and I know we're not there yet, but one of the things you sent me yesterday, the inventory under the financial piece, it talked about donating your money, and it was interesting. I actually bristled when I read that, and I think the reason I had to ask, like, "Well, why am I having a reaction to this?" And it was because I know that that isn't always an option for people. And like you said, I mean, I've got clients who, they wanna do Pilates and they wanna do yoga, but
Mhm.
to pay out for all those
Right.
classes
Right.
isn't realistic. So I think the other thing is when we're thinking about self-care is not just thinking about, like, what are the blocks, but am I doing this? What can I do within my means? And
Exactly.
and maybe that means time, like the example you just gave of 2 minutes, doesn't have to be an hour. Um, is it financial? Is it about your energy?
Mhm.
I have some clients that I don't know how to do it. I know my watch will do it for me, but it will track, like, how much energy you have
Mm.
in a day, and I have some people that that is their guide, and they say, "Okay, this is what I can allot today."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yep, so I'm really glad we're incorporating this into our conversation, right? Because we're not suggesting I fully understand that, and I'm included in this, right? Like,
Mhm.
would I love to just to throughout my whole day be incorporating these long periods of whatever it is, like exercise and meditation and eating the perfectly balanced meal and, going on vacations and all of these things that are absolutely wonderful. And you need to ask yourself individually, what is realistic for me?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I'm really glad that we're talking about that piece. Is there anything else you wanted to say about physical self-care, or do you wanna move on to some of these other categories?
I think we can move on.
Okay. Do you wanna, choose one?
Sure. I think, probably the let's see. I mean, like I said, they all fit together, but I think it's caring for your emotions,
Mhm.
and I like to think of this from a positive lens, if you will. Um, I think probably one of the biggest things, and this is hard for people, and I mean, there's a lot of layers to this, but I think it's important for us to express our feelings, meaning don't bottle them up. Um, and of course that's not I'm thinking in my head as I'm saying this, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking of someone who's really struggling. They're angry or they're sad, but they're stuffing it. There's that part of don't bottle it up. But I think the other side of don't bottle it up is make sure, and this is just my opinion, but express your gratitude. Express, what am I thankful for today?
Mm.
Um, if there is a friend that you just happen to be thinking about them and you're like, wow, like I really love that person. why not take the 2 seconds to let them
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
you know?
No, I love that you're bringing this up, Sarah, because you're right. I think when we think about kind of emotional self-care, you immediately think of, and understandably so, like, right, how do I express those hard feelings? How do I
Mhm.
work on not repressing? And absolutely, obviously, we're therapists. We're all on board with that. But I love that you're also including in this category the flip side of that. Like, what positive emotions can I generate within myself that maybe I'm not giving enough care and attention to? And appreciation and great gratitude is a perfect example of that. There is real power in keeping a gratitude journal,
Yes.
right? So maybe you have a separate journal where you do get out all those really hard, deep, angry, fearful feelings,
Mhm.
and then maybe you also keep a journal where what did I appreciate today? And it can be literally as simple as I was on my walk today and I just stopped and I just saw the beauty in this flower, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't Gratitude is easy when it comes to big things, right? So if I found out I won $1,000,000 tomorrow, I'd probably feel pretty grateful. That's easy, right? But what about the everyday things
Yes.
we can overlook?
Exactly, exactly. And I think, that again comes back to that idea of positivity, positive thinking, but also turning that inward into that positive self-talk, paying attention to what messages am I giving myself? Because, like you said, like, noticing the little things maybe in nature along your walk. Are you also noticing little things about yourself
Mhm.
or maybe about your relationships that you really are like, "You know what? That's pretty cool. I'm really fortunate."
Absolutely. I can give you a really quick personal example of gratitude, that's literally happening right now in this moment. Our town had a major water main break,
Mhm.
and it was pretty major, and as a result, we are under a, boil all of your water advisory. So, no drinking water out of the
Mm.
out of the faucet, even if it's filtered.
Wow.
Um, and no cooking either with the water, for at least a few days, and it those things really right, so yesterday I took a lot of time to boil a bunch of water and put it into containers, and now in this morning, I was thinking about, "Okay, how much time do I need to allot today?" Because it's also for the pets, right? Like, the pets can
Right.
drink this water, and, I'm only bringing that up because it's rather than it would be easy to focus on, "Oh my god, like, I don't have time for this." Instead, what I'm trying to do is to really, like, take a step back and feel gratitude for living in a country where typically, right, fresh running water is available. And I know when this ban is lifted, right, I'm going to hopefully take a moment to really feel appreciation for being
Yeah.
able to turn on my faucet, and yeah, we have a filter, but and drink the water, without having to boil it.
Right.
So I wasn't going to even bring that up, but just speaking of gratitude, right, I just felt like a good time to mention that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and, that reminds me and I won't do a I remember back when I don't remember if it was 2011 when we had the ice storm, but we were without power for I think it was 11 days, and in
Mhm,
the beginning, the water part, like, I lived on a lake at that time, so that was how we were flushing the toilet and things
mhm,
like that, and
mhm,
it really actually became habit, so
mhm.
that after the 11 days, it was kind of like, "Well, what do I do?" Like, part of my routine would be going down, breaking
Right.
the ice, getting water. you
Yep.
know, and then I'm like, I have all this free time. I don't have to be prepping to get through the day, making sure the fire's fed, and it was just really interesting, and, like, that wave of gratitude really washed over me. I mean, initially, I was frustrated, but then it just became, "Okay, this is life, this is not a big deal," and then you realize, wow, like, we have so many advantages
Yes.
that we do really take for granted because
Yeah.
they're really woven into our lives.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So that's a piece of the emotional self-care we're talking about, right? It's ex
Yes.
it's expressing your emotions, and it's all expressing the hard stuff, but not forgetting to also express the good stuff.
Right, and I think it's important for people and I just wanna make sure, I don't want people to think that I'm pigeonholing the expressing emotions in terms of using your words or whether that's in conversation or journaling. I think it's important to express emotions in ways that work for you. So,
Mhm.
for example, if you're an artist and if you're about creating, if you're I can tell you when especially if I'm happy and I'm at a live music event, it's really hard for me to sit still, like, I have to dance because that makes me happy, it helps my body, it helps my mind, it's ho part of how I'm expressing that joy, and I just wanna make sure people understand, like, it's okay to think outside the box, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's really what works for you.
Yeah, 100%, and it's so synchronistic that you just mentioned that about the creativity because, uh, my husband is incredibly creative, and just the other day, he was up in his loft creating, and he came downstairs, and he showed me these beautiful works of art he had done, and he said, "Art is truly my therapy." And
Mm,
I see it, right? Like, if he wasn't able to create, um, he wouldn't be nearly as just centered and balanced and grounded in his emotions as he is.
yeah.
For some people, right, it's therapy. It's literally therapy, right?
Yes.
Therapy can be an amazing way to take care of your emotional well-being, your emotional health, but it's not necessarily for everybody.
Right.
There are other ways, right? Maybe walking out in the woods with a journal and y- sitting down in nature and writing in your journal. Maybe that's your therapy.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up too. That there's so many different ways I think to care for your emotions, and you just need to sit down and really tune into yourself and decide like what resonates with me and then make a commitment to practice it.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything you would throw under the taking care of emotions that I missed?
The only I'm looking at my notes. The only other ones I have written down that we probably didn't mention, music. I think
Mhm.
that listening to music and or creating music can be an amazing therapy for people. I know that music, certain types of music, it's amazing how much it can lift my mood, or maybe I'm listening to a piece of music that puts me into a melancholic state, right? It's
Yep.
but maybe that's what I'm needing in that moment.
Right.
Maybe I'm feeling sad and it's funny, it's making me think of a client that she has trouble um she has difficulty crying, and it's not that she doesn't want to cry. It's literally like something blocks her from crying, and sometimes in our sessions, she'll start the session by saying something to me like, "All right, Megan, make me cry." And we laugh about it, but one of the ways she's found she can kind of stimulate those emotions is through certain pieces of music.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, and I also have a client who is a songwriter, and she's experienced a lot of trauma in her life, and she her way of really getting those emotions out is through music. And I have another client who's a poet, and
Mm,
poetry is absolutely a therapeutic practice for her as well.
that's great.
Yeah.
What other categories do you have in terms of self-care?
Well, one of the big ones that I don't think we've really mentioned yet is, I'm calling it, but you can call it whatever you want. I called it social self-care. I don't really like
Mm,
that now that I'm thinking of it. I think I'd rather call it like connections, right? Like this category to me is all about nurturing deep and healthy relationships with others.
yep.
Um and I think under this category it could also include perhaps your relationship, say, with your community.
Mhm.
It could be relationship with your workplace. Although I think that workplace or occupational self-care could technically be its own category in and of itself. But like we
True.
said, these things overlap.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's about how do you find time to, right, to have healthy, nurturing connections.
Mm.
And that could be challenging for adults, especially.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I hadn't thought about this until just now as you were speaking, where I see this is a real challenge for people is when, say, for example, I've had this happen with a few clients where they've retired and they have moved. They've
Mm,
said, like, "Oh, I've always
yeah.
wanted to go live here." And they go live wherever they want. And then they're having a really hard time finding community. And so not they don't and maybe they're still connected to people here or
Mhm.
where they were prior, but it's not the same because they haven't established that sense of community yet to say, "Hey, let's go grab a coffee."
Right.
Or
Absolutely.
I've I'm thinking about this and I really wanna have a deeper conversation, but wait a second, I don't really have anyone here that I can do that with. And I think especially given, let's just say, that stage of life, because a lot of us as adults, when we are creating community, it is through work or
Mhm.
maybe the gym or,
Mhm.
so it's also some people have to really go outside their comfort zone
Yes.
to establish, okay, well, oh, maybe I'm gonna go and join a hiking group. Well, but I don't know anybody. Or, I'm afraid to do that. And I think again, it's how do we maybe reframe the lens? Like, yes, maybe there's an anxiety about trying something new or connecting to people we don't know to hopefully grow a
Mhm.
network. But can we look at it through the lens of, okay, this anxiety I'm having really is temporary and short term. Like the long term gain is like, I am going to have my group of people, I'm going to have my activities, I'm going to have that community that it really fulfills and nurtures this part of me.
Absolutely. Absolutely, right. So that's another theme I think that's emerging in our episode today. Sometimes you have to think outside the box.
Right. Right.
When you mentioned that population, when you're retiring and that being challenging for social connections. Another one that I encounter a lot in private practice is that kind of phase of life. I mean, it's obviously gonna be different ages for different people, but I'm just gonna throw out there, like, in your 30s, or say maybe even younger 30s, when your 20s, you've outgrown your 20s,
Mhm.
and a lot of people start to have children, they start to have families, and I have heard countless times through the years, like, it is really hard to make friends at this age, or
Mhm.
even to maintain friendships you already have. And that makes so much sense, right? Because, oh my gosh, like, if you have children, if you have if you have pets, if you
Mhm.
have full-time jobs, um, wow, can those other connections start to get put down way down on the priority list? Again, very understandably so,
Right.
but
Right.
I think that that's just another thing that I hear a lot. Um, how do people make friends? And I think that adults think that they're the only ones that are having difficulty with it, and I'm telling you that it's it's I hear it all the time.
I do too, and an interesting phase of life that I've heard this around too is especially people who have kids, and so it's taking that phase that you just described, and then say they have, you know, now they're involved in maybe their kids' activities, their sports, so their social circle revolves around really the other parents. This is what our kids are doing, and okay, now we've connected. Well,
Mhm.
wait a second, now our kids graduated, and we
Yeah.
don't hang out with these people anymore because we don't have to go to swim team, we don't have to go to soccer practice.
Right.
And I hear that a lot where it's like, okay, now I also not only do I have free time,
Mhm.
but what do I wanna do? And then
Right.
how do I who do I talk to? Because, we would hang out because we were soccer moms, and we'd hang out at the games, or we'd be preparing for the next tournament,
Right.
and maybe otherwise you would not be talking to that person.
Exactly. Like the some of those connections happened organically, right? Like it makes me
Right.
think of high school too, where middle school, whatever. But in school, when you're younger, I think it's easy to almost I don't even know if it's that you take it for granted, but y- you're, you know, day after day, year after year, you're often, if you're not moving a lot, you're with the same
Yes.
group and you just kind of naturally form friendships. It's almost like I don't want to say it doesn't take effort, but in a way it doesn't take at all like the same level of effort as it is I think it can once those school years are over.
Correct. I agree.
So it sounds like if I'm hearing you right, and I think I agree that our advice with this category is we both agree it can be challenging,
Mhm.
but that it's important, right? And maybe it might include having to step outside your comfort zone and trying that new thing or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and just to kind of maybe unless there's other things you have around the relationship piece, um, the one thing that's really popping up for me right now is, and I'm sure listeners you've heard, if you haven't, it's worth looking up the blue zones, and these are communities around the world, I think there might be 5 or 7 of them, where the longevity, the lifespan of people
Mm,
is very long,
mm,
and a lot of it has to do with relationship.
mhm,
And it's the idea of self-care because either they're part of that community, they're doing things together, they're having meals together, and they're healthy meals. Maybe they are, I think maybe one of them, don't quote me on this, might be Greece, where, they have to walk. They don't just hop in their
mhm.
car.
Right.
So if you think of all those different elements, they're really just tied up in their lifestyle.
I love that. I love that. So if I'm hearing you right, we could research these blue zones and maybe um learn what these communities are doing to stay so happy and healthy and
Yes.
start to incorporate some of those things. I love that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about the social self-care?
No, I don't think so. Um, actually, well, I don't know where this fits, but, one of the things is I think what I'm coming back to is self-compassion,
Mm,
and I don't know where I would necessarily put that, but for some reason that's popping up for me. We haven't mentioned that, um, And maybe it's popping up because of the difficulty we just talked about how, as adults, relationships can be difficult. Um, and we're talking about, a lot of this might require outside the box thinking,
Mhm.
which I think when we do that, it is important to have some self-compassion because this stuff may not be easy.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm wondering, Sarah, maybe the reason why you were having trouble for a second, like, well, where do we put this? Is because
Mm,
really it flows throughout all of these categories,
it's a
right?
good point.
Self
Yeah.
compassion is it's I think it's key. If you think about it, it's key to all of these categories because you have to have some level of compassion and love for yourself. I think if you are going to put a lot of attention into these different categories.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like and I feel like I've taken a left turn here by even bringing this up, but I think you just said something which ties it back for me, and it's that it is that self-love piece, and because I think part of self-care, and I think I saw this in your notes, was the word intentional,
Yes.
and I think that's part of it, right? Because if we're here we are breaking down all these categories, if you will, of like, okay, these are different types of self-care, different ways we focus on self-care. And I could almost see someone listening to this and going, "Oh my god, this is so overwhelming." There's
Mm,
so many parts that I need to pay attention to
mhm.
or you're focusing on. And maybe that's why this is coming up for me is it's
Okay.
that idea of, you know, this whole idea of self-compassion is doing things at the pace that works for you and being kind to yourself in the process. Like, you don't have to wake up tomorrow and be like, "Hey, I'm the self-compassion queen, look at me."
Mhm. Right.
I mean, not
No,
self-compassion, self-care.
and I'm yes, I'm glad you're bringing this up, and I don't think it's a left turn at all. I think that as we're doing this episode, we're realizing or we're not even realizing, but we're thinking about some of these things that can get in the way, right? Of
Mm,
and absolutely overwhelm could be one of them. And it makes me think again of my example of, right, this isn't about suddenly implementing. We're not suggesting tomorrow morning you wake up and you're implementing like 10 new things.
right.
It's more like, okay, I want to stretch my body more in the morning. I don't really an hour feels like that's too much for me right now. I'm gonna start literally with 2 minutes, and in that 2 minutes, I'm going to do my best. I'm not gonna
Mhm,
be perfect at it, but I'm gonna do my best to stay in the moment, to stay present,
mm,
to appreciate my body and and what my body can do,
mhm,
and maybe that's it, right? Like, maybe if there are listeners out there where you're really resonating with Sarah's saying here and you're feeling kinda overwhelmed, my suggestion would be pick one category, and we're going to give you we're going to give you links to self-care inventory that you might want to pursue. I know, Sarah, you briefly mentioned the inventory, but
yep,
basically it's a worksheet that can maybe help you to identify one area, not all. You don't
mm,
have to start with all areas, but one area where you realize, "Oh, I'm kind of imbalanced." Let's just say let's just say it's physical, right? Like,
mhm,
it's the physical self-care. Um, what is one thing I want to start to implement? And you just start there.
yes. Yeah, I that's thank you for tying that together, and that's important, like you said, just picking one, starting
Mhm,
square one is
mhm.
but you don't have to take on all 10.
Right. Are
Okay.
there any other categories you would like to mention?
I think there's there are 2 left that are important, and one is we've mentioned the financial,
Mhm.
self-care, and I view that as, I think probably the biggest one is in terms of staying present is about living within your means, and that can be
Yes.
very challenging for
Yes.
people, um, and, like, the present being living within your means, paying your bills on time.
Mhm.
And then I think there's other things in terms of your future, you know, are you saving? Are you able to save? Are you able to
Mhm.
have, say, a retirement account or a college
Mhm.
account for your child? Um, and I think and the reason why I think it's important to bring the financial health up is because I see finances being such a stressor for so many people.
Agreed.
And it's whether it's they're worried about, you know, what happens if this breaks down, I'm not gonna be able to afford it, or there's other things they want to take care of in it as forms of self-care or even their health that, you know what, I really wanna do X, but insurance doesn't cover it.
Mhm.
So, what do I need to do to make that happen? Can I make that happen? Versus just saying, "Forget it, I'm gonna throw caution to the wind," and now I'm
Right.
$6,000 in debt, and now I'm even more stressed than when I started.
Exactly, and, I think that this category is one of the categories that maybe we don't initially think about when we think about self-care. In
Right.
fact, it might be one of the categories where we're doing the opposite, meaning like you just said, like, self-care does not mean, "You know what? Oh, to hell with it. I'm gonna go spend thousands of dollars on this vacation. I'm gonna put thousands of dollars on my credit card, um, when I'm having trouble paying my electric bill, right? Like,
Right.
but some people could maybe justify that as, "Well, isn't that self-care? I love myself.
Yes.
I'm gonna go do this vacation, um, and put all these other things like paying my electric bill, below that." And, that's it's I think it's a really good idea to look at this category in particular and just ask yourself those questions, right?
Mhm.
Another good one might be, I think this is on the inventory. I did like this one. Um, when I go into a store, do I just purchase what I intended to purchase, right, or
Yes.
what I need? Um, and so it's those kind of things. It's like financial self-care is about y- you know, hopefully almost changing your relationship with money,
Mhm.
with your finances. Um so that you're coming from a balanced place rather than one where maybe you're kind of avoiding, or there's a lack of awareness perhaps of
Mhm.
spending that, oh, it's only a, $5, well, it's probably even more now at Starbucks, but cup of coffee, right? But those things add up. And again, I'm all about my coffee, right? I do like to indulge in a good cup of coffee. Uh, but I want to do it with awareness.
Yes. Yes, for sure, for sure. I think the other and this I mean, I think this is a big thing for you is, our spiritual health.
Yes.
Do you wanna talk more about that, or do you want me to?
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
But you jump in at any time.
Sure.
Um, so spiritual self-care is a very big one for me, but I also want to acknowledge that um this may not be this may not be for everybody, or it may not be on everybody's priority list, and I
Mhm.
absolutely respect that.
Mhm.
But spiritual self-care doesn't necessarily mean that you are engaged in religious or spiritual practices all day, every day. It could mean more like you're exploring like the bigger picture in terms of perhaps like your purpose, right? You're exploring the bigger picture about your your values, your beliefs, like what is important to me. And then for some, it also, and this is, I'm definitely in this category, it could also mean, um, what is my belief in a higher power, right?
Mhm.
Like what is do I have belief in a higher power? And this could be anything. You can call it God, you could call it um literally nature, you
Yep.
could call it, there's so many different ways, right, to think about this. Um, but some of the practices, I guess, that I would consider to fall under this category, and again, they're going to fall into other categories too, but
Mhm.
I would put my meditation practice under this category.
Mhm.
Um, and again, for me, meditation is really just, it's not about shutting out every possible thought that's going to come across my mind, because I think that's pretty hard to do. But it could be about just practicing the art of slowing down my body, practicing the art of slowing down my mind so that that constant chatter, when we start to diminish that chatter, that's when we might start to feel perhaps a higher power, right? That's
Mhm.
coming through. And it's for me, it's imperative for my self-care.
I like that because I think what happens is when we calm that chatter, we also it aligns us with our kind of what I would call, like, our soul's purpose,
Mhm.
and not only that connection to something greater, but it's even our life purpose because it allows us to, I think, see things more clearly, um, because you're kind of not just the chatter, but it's I think it frees up space, if you will.
100%. Yeah.
And I think another one for me, and this might sound a little odd, but for me, this is part of the spiritual health where it's and we could probably do a whole episode on this, but it's the idea of practicing forgiveness. And I bring this up because I think when we and I don't even know if these are necessarily the right words, but say if we're harboring resentment or anger or we're carrying, this frustration with someone, if someone did something to us or did something to a loved one that we just, it was heinous or it was terrible. And there's that idea of, well, if I forgive them, then it means it's okay. No, it doesn't mean it's okay. It means that the forgiveness part's for you so that it creates space and that is you are not carrying that burden. And again, I think it's very similar to that idea of chatter. If we're able to forgive and
Mhm.
release that, that frees up space and in our minds, in our hearts, and allows us to, whether it's a certain freedom,
Mhm.
it allows us to focus on things, even if it's as simple as if I forgive this, that allows me to really take better care of me.
Yes, absolutely, Sarah. And I 100% agree. I would put forgiveness and forgiveness practices and also self forgiveness,
Yes.
as well as forgiveness of others. I would put this under the category of spiritual self care. It's
Yeah.
that, it's, if we all took more time to practice forgive, forgiving everything,
Mhm.
we we'd be in a better place. I don't mean to get all I don't even know what the right word is here, but self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others without a doubt. is a huge part of self-care.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything you think we've missed or
Well
anything that we haven't covered?
well, it's interesting. So this inventory that we will, include how to access it in the show notes. They actually this so I say they, it comes from, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. There's
Mhm,
lots of different self-care inventories you can take. I just like this one because I thought it was thorough, and it made me think about some aspects of self-care I hadn't. And they actually have 8 categories. But I think that maybe we can leave it to our listeners to look at the self-care inventory if they're so inclined and see
mhm,
some of the categories that are listed. The only one I can think of off the top of my head that we haven't mentioned that is in my notes anyway is, I'm not crazy about the titles I came up with. I was calling it mental
mhm.
self-care, but I think really what I'm talking about is cognitive self-care. I think
Mm,
the inventory called it intellectual self-care, but this is simply the practices that we put in place, especially as we start to age, and
yes.
eventually we all do, right? That really, like, how am I keeping my brain happy and healthy, right?
Mhm,
And there's so many different ways that you could do this. But I think as we get older, it really is important, to whether it's, are there exercises we need to do to keep our memories healthy?
mhm,
How about, I have a client that's in his 70s, and he's retired, and we had many conversations early on about this idea that he he was a little, I don't know, shameful might be too strong of a word, but he was a bit embarrassed that he was spending some of his time each day doing puzzles.
mhm,
And these are hard puzzles. These are not just simple puzzles. And I asked him, I said, "Well, what what are you embarrassed about?" And he said, "Well, I don't know if there's meaning behind doing a puzzle." And I said, "Who is to say there's no meaning
mhm.
behind doing this 1,000-piece puzzle, right? Like, you are keeping your brain so engaged.
Yes.
Um, so it's things like that that would, fall under this category.
I think thank you so much for making sure we talked about that because I think that's an important one, and I had forgotten about it. But I know a few weeks ago, I had come across I didn't read the article, but the headline was basically, "Now in this age of AI, the more we rely on it, the more it actually we have a cognitive decline."
Yes.
And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you think about the art of writing or organizing, um, that takes brain power. And doing a puzzle, or knitting or quilting or whatever is your thing. And I think when we're young, I mean, I can certainly say now granted, when I was in my 20s, I mean, AI wasn't a thing,
Right.
but I wasn't thinking about my brain health at all. I wasn't thinking, "Okay, is this gonna help me or hurt me?" And now it's definitely something I think about, and I want to protect what I have because I don't want it to decline. And, you see this a lot where, I mean, I can tell you being a therapist as long as I have, there's certain things I could probably therapy wise do in my sleep at this point.
Mhm.
But I don't have the skill set that I used to when I was in business because I don't use the same skills anymore.
Right.
And it's kind of a struggle because when you realize that, "Oh, I'm not really sharp in this area anymore,"
Mhm.
or that used to be, I could do that in my sleep, and now I'm like, "What? I have to think about this?"
Yes.
So that is a really, really important element of self-care because, like you said, the natural evolution is we are going to decline because we age. But, what can we do to help ourselves in the meantime?
Exactly. What can we do to prevent the decline? And again, that loops everything back to this idea of self care being an intentional and preventative um, practice.
Yes. Yeah. One thing I also wanna throw out there, and I think you mentioned this in an audio message to me when you found this inventory, was that idea of environment.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yes.
why this is actually really sticking out to me right now because I've had this conversation a lot this week with clients about how environment is how it impacts our health. Um, and I think we generally, at least I can tell you in sessions, I generally talk about it in terms of, well, if you're stressed, do you have a space that you can decompress and what is in
Hmm.
that space and
Right.
using all your senses? Do you have good smells? Do you have pretty things to look at? Is it comfortable? Um, but it was interesting this week. I had to think about our Doberman's dermatologist is retiring and I have to find him a new doctor.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I had the conversation with her about was what's going to be a good fit for him. And I also had to think about my options are very small. Like it's literally I'm probably going to have to go I don't want to and I'm going to see if I can avoid this but go to Boston.
Hmm.
So, he's a country dog. Bringing him into that type
Hmm.
of stimulation is going to
Yep.
be hard for him. It's going to be hard for me.
Yep.
And so I have to think about, okay, it was at first I was thinking, okay, what's best for him? What's best for him? And then I thought, but I have to think about what's best for me because my energy is
Right.
to, go down that leash into him. And it was very interesting because one of the clients I was talking to yesterday, we were talking about that idea of going into the city. And I said, yeah, when I went to college, my undergrad, I was in Boston at Northeastern. I lived in town and I loved it.
Hmm.
I love the energy. Now I
Hmm.
go into Boston and my
Hmm.
body vibrates
Hmm.
and I'm not as comfortable.
Right.
And so for me, that is a part of self-care. That environment is really
Yes.
important. And that really struck me. It was funny that to me that you brought it up because I initially thought, I'm like, "Yeah, that's a really good point." And then literally after you said it, 3 different examples, and it came into
Interesting.
conversations.
Yeah. Right. Right, and really, I have to give credit to, again, this self-care inventory that comes, via the Michigan Department of Health, because I hadn't thought of that environment. They call it environmental wellness,
Okay.
and I hadn't really thought of that myself, like, as a category, but it's interesting because it's incredibly important to me too.
Mm.
And I'm looking at this assessment right now, and a couple that stand out to me under this category and speak definitely to what you were just saying. One of them says, in general, so this is like a rating, right? So you're supposed to rate, 1 to 5, whether you agree with the statement. And it's in general, I feel safe across settings that I
Mhm.
regularly occupy. And then the next one is, in general, I feel accepted across settings that I
Oh.
generally occupy. And maybe this is a whole nother episode in and of itself, but it's interesting, right? Like it absolutely can be about, do I like you had said pretty things. Like do I have the things in my space that make me feel calm and comfortable?
Mhm.
But it could go even deeper than that, right? And so I'm really grateful that that's one of the categories I was talking about where I feel like now in thinking about my own self-care, but also especially in the world today, thinking about others too, like with regard to feeling safe and accepted. Um, right, like, wow, self-care can just it can go so deep. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on today?
I think I'm good. We're quite over time, but I think it you know, it just speaks to how deep this topic can run, right?
Yes.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I feel good about where we're at.
Okay. So I guess this marks our last full episode of our first season. And I can tell you, at least personally, this is for me a big sense of accomplishment, feeling of accomplishment. I'm proud of what we've been doing. Um, and I want to add, I want listeners to know that, part of us taking a break here is not just to prepare for season 2 and kind of reflect and reassess and things like that, but it is really to practice what we preach. And
Yes.
it's especially here we are tying things up with self-care, and it is important for the both of us. We've talked a lot about this, that it's important that we spend time with our loved ones. It's important that we practice self-care and we enjoy really just being. So, I think I would definitely encourage people to, do the same, incorporate self-care as much as you can in whatever ways work for you. And as always, um, listeners, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening and taking the time. And if you like what you're hearing, please share it with others. And if there's anything you want us to focus on for season 2, any ideas that you have, topics, formats,
Mhm.
whatever, we are open. So, give us a shout and let us know. So, okay.
Beautifully said, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Take good care, everyone.
Take care.
If you want to share your thoughts or ideas with us, you can email us at therapyunpluggedpodcast@proton.me. Until next time, be sure to subscribe to Therapy Unplugged on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts.